Snowy the Snowman, The Many Colors of Love by Damien A. Lima. Snowy the Snowman, Snowy's Quest for Love. In a cold corner of the North Pole, under the northern lights, in a small town made of snow called America, in a small but humble home, there was one sad, lonely snowman called Snowy. Snowy did not know of the world outside of America, but he knew that other snowmen and snowwomen all made fun of him, and he longed to find others just like himself. Although the other snowmen and snowwomen were good people and lived good lives, they only knew what they had been taught. They believed if a snowman wanted to marry another snowman, and not a snowwoman, that it was unnatural and it was wrong. You see, this was how Snowy was raised as well, but he could not stop what he felt inside. Snowy would spend long nights thinking of how much he wanted to have someone to love and have a family to call his own. He knew that if he held on to his dream, that someday it would come true. Late one cold November night, Snowy decided it was time that he went out into the world outside of America and make his dreams come true. For he knew dreams could come true, but you need to find your dream, for they will not find you. So Snowy packed up a bag and he headed out of town to see what was in the big world outside of America. He headed to the south and very soon discovered traveling away from home was not easy, but it could be fun. Snowy walked all night and day to felt very tired. He finally came across a house that seemed to be enchanted, with a yard full of people and lots of food. The yard was beautiful with flowers and fruit trees everywhere you looked. A kind older woman came to the fence and asked Snowy if he was lost and if he would like something to eat. Snowy was filled with joy from the woman's generosity and kindly accepted her offer. The woman's name was Rose, and how it was a fitting name, for the woman was as sweet and beautiful as a rose. She asked Snowy what he was looking for Snowy told Rose his tale, and all about the quest for love and others like himself, even though he feared she might make fun of him as the others from his town did. Over the next few days, Rose taught Snowy a lot about life and love. He learned that Rose was a young girl of 22 and her husband a man in his 30s when they wed. And all these years later, they still loved each other and had many children and grandchildren. Rose showed Snowy that love comes in many shapes, sizes, and colors. But when you find love, you should grab it and hold on to it tightly. Love is one of the greatest gifts life has to offer. It does not matter if it is two snowmen or a snowman and an Eskimo. Love is just love, no matter what shape it takes. Although grateful for all Rose taught him, sadly, Snowy had to say goodbye to her and her family. He would have loved to stay there, since Rose's house was full of love, and Snowy felt at home there for the first time in his life. Snowy knew that there was love somewhere out there for him, so he needed to go and find it. Rose gave Snowy a hug and some food for his long trip. So, armed with Rose's words, Snowy felt for the first time he was ready for anything he would find on his journey. The road to love. Early in the morning, Snowy packed his things up and headed off on his quest for love. He looked down and tears filled his eyes when he saw inside the basket Rose made for him of food, a note wishing him luck on the long road ahead with some money to help him along the way. There also was an enchanted rose from her garden, so he would always know there was a place for him in her home and in her family. Snowy found himself back on the road and thinking of Rose's words and how she found love in a place where she never thought she would. He realized that Rose and her husband faced a lot of adversity about their age and race, but knew they made it, and in a lot of ways, they were his heroes. Before Snowy realized it, he was in a small town of Eternal. Here, Snowy saw many people of different kinds: birds, fish, snow people, and seals, just to mention a few. All seemed to be scary to Snowy, as he had only lived with other snowmen, but now he thought of Rose, and new friends and love were all around him, if he just showed kindness and was to have an open heart. Worn out from his long journey, Snowy looked for a place to rest before he went looking around the city. He came across a small bed and breakfast called the Winter Solstice. The woman who ran the place was a red and yellow phoenix, and her husband a bluebird of happiness. They showed Snowy his room, and he quickly went to sleep. Snowy went off into a deep sleep and dreamed of a beautiful fairy princess named Kensington. The princess and Snowy talked all about his quest and what it was that Rose and her family had that he wanted to find for himself. Snowy wanted to find an enchanted place just like the one Rose had, so he too could build a life of love like hers. Kensington explained to Snowy it was not Rose's house that was enchanted. The flowers and fruit trees grew there in that spot in the North Pole, not out of magic, but out of the love that Rose and her family had for each other and for the rest of the world. The warmth of their hearts melted away the snow and gave the fruit trees and flowers the needed sun to grow. Waking up from his nap, Snowy went downstairs to find a young blue and lavender phoenix playing with a baby ram. Snowy was surprised since he did not know a phoenix could be any other color but red and yellow. Snowy politely introduced himself to the young girl. She said, "My name is Kenzie, but you can call me Bird. All my friends do." She was the child of the owners of the bed and breakfast. Snowy told the young girl that she was very beautiful, and he had never seen a phoenix like her. She told him he never would again, since she is the only one of her kind. "That's what happens when you mix a phoenix and a bluebird of happiness," she said as she laughed. Bird told Snowy the baby ram was named Ramsey, and they watched him while his two mothers worked. Snowy asked how Ramsey had two mothers since he had never heard of that before. Bird told him that his two mothers were lesbians and had gone to the doctor for help so they could have a child made from their love for one another. Snowy thought this was such a great thing to see that two women or two men could have a family. His heart was filled with joy to know he too could have a family someday. Full of new hope, Snowy went out to see what Eternal had to offer. Snowy finds love. Snowy was filled with joy thinking of how he too could have love and a family. It was all there. If he wanted it, he could have it. Snowy thought Eternal just might be his new home, or at least where he could stay for a while. Since he would be there for some time, Snowy decided to find a place to live. By midday, he found a place of his own. It was not big, but had all Snowy needed. Excited about his new home, Snowy ran back to get his things from the winter solstice. On his way there, Snowy ran into a man on the street, and they both fell to the ground. Snowy was very embarrassed. He said sorry to the man and ran away without ever looking at the guy he knocked over. Snowy soon arrived at the winter solstice and packed up his things. Life was looking good for him, and Snowy was very happy. That night, after putting his things away in his new home, Snowy went out to get something to eat for dinner and see what Eternal had to offer. Eternal was full of many things Snowy had never seen before. The city was filled with art, music, and diversity. Everywhere you looked, Eternal was bursting with life. The next morning, Snowy started to look for a job so he could begin his life there in Eternal. He tried many different jobs over the next few days. First, he was a postman, but after walking so far to get to Eternal, he did not want to walk every day for a job. Then he tried to be a police officer, but that was dangerous and a very hard job as well. Next, he tried to be a cook, but the heat was too much. Since he was made of snow, he started to melt. He then went to the local museum and got a job selling admission tickets. This was a job he could do and gave Snowy a chance to meet many people of all kinds. One night, a tall man approached Snowy. He was frightened but kept an open heart and mind. The man introduced himself as Julian, and he was a night watchman at the museum, as well as the man Snowy knocked over in the street earlier that week. Snowy's fear went away fast, and he started to laugh and turned red for running away when he knocked him over. Julian was just like Snowy. He liked other men as well, and Snowy found Julian to be very good looking. He had found the first person like himself, even though they did not look alike. This was a very big discovery for Snowy. That night when Snowy got home, he was excited. Snowy could not wait to write to Rose to tell her all about his new friend, Julian, and all the things that had happened since they last spoke. Many weeks passed, and Snowy and Julian grew very close. They became the two happiest men you ever saw. Soon they came to see how much their love was growing and wanted to be together all the time. Snowy thought to himself he had finally found love, and it happened without knowing it. Snowy starts a family. Over the next few years, Snowy and Julian's love grew stronger. They ended up getting married and bought a big house where they could build a future together. Julian showed Snowy many new things like the theater, art galleries, and all kinds of movies. Snowy soon saw there was beauty in everything all around him. One day, Julian sat Snowy down and talked to him about starting a family. Julian wanted a child very much and thought Snowy had a lot of love and would be a wonderful father. Snowy was very excited by this and knew even though they both wanted a child, it would be a lot of work. They first decided that they wanted to adopt a little boy, one who was about 3 years old. Most people wanted babies, and it would be easier to adopt an older child. And an older child needs love just as much as babies. Julian and Snowy spent many months getting the house ready for a child. They bought lots of toys and a new bed for the child's room, and even cartoon movies. They went to the first adoption company, but they were told 2 men could not adopt and come back when they each had a wife. Snowy felt as if he were back in America and was very sad. He thought this was it and that they would not have the family they wanted. Julian told Snowy to have faith and believe that all would happen. We just need to take one step at a time. After a few weeks, Julian and Snowy found an adoption company called The Many Colors of Love. This was an adoption agency that did not look at them as 2 men, but as 2 people who could give a child a good home and a chance at a future. Julian and Snowy looked at many children, and they both wanted to take them all home. But one child stood out the most. It was a little boy with blue eyes, dark hair, and big dimples. The child's name was Giovanni, and he was 4 years old. Giovanni had 2 brothers that were also up for adoption. Both of his brothers were older. One was 6 and named Roberto, and the other was 8, and he was named Antonio. All of them had dark hair and blue eyes. Snowy and Julian decided they could not break up a family, so they would adopt all 3 and give them the family and love they deserved. It took weeks to get the adoption settled, but during that time, Snowy and Julian got 2 more beds and more toys for the boys. The big day finally came, and they got to take the boys home. Julian set up a surprise for Snowy. He had all the friends Snowy made along his journey waiting back at the house to welcome the boys home. When Snowy came home, he saw Rose and her family, Ramsey, his 2 moms, as well as Bird and her parents. Snowy could not believe they were all there. Snowy was filled with joy that all his friends were part of this big day. For the first time, Snowy realized that the love and the family that had wanted for so long had been with him the whole time. Rose and all the other people he met on his journey and held in his heart, for they are very much a part of his family. He now knew a family is not always made of people who are related to you. Families can also be people you hold close to your heart and would never dream of living without. It was a long journey, but Snowy now had everything he dreamed of.